Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an NPC bodybuilder and animal pack athlete. Today's guest is Gary Turner. Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
For sure, man. So Gary, we're just going to dive right into things. I kind of like to start this podcast off by asking all my guests, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders or fitness athletes of all time?
Okay, I got a couple because I've been in the game, since 2006. So a few of them are a little bit older. Jay Cutler being the first one. I liked everything from Jay's physique, although my physique is not, Mr. Olympia level or Jay's caliber. I like everything he stands for. He's a humble champion. He's a great ambassador. Of course, he did have a badass physique and he had a great career. I've met him a few times. I like everything that he kind of stands for. He's kind of, he's old school mindset in terms of the work ethic and everything like that, but still with a kind of a contemporary twist. Like he stays with the times, he dresses, in 2021 and stuff like that. I really like that about him. I started paying attention to bodybuilding right when Jay won his first Olympia. So I wasn't a competitor yet. I was just starting to lift weights in 2006. And that's when I saw a Jay Cutler YouTube video. And I was like, I can't believe somebody can look like that. I said, I said, I want to look like that. I don't know how long it's going to take. It's going to take a long time. And, here we are today. Some of the other guys that I do follow and like Dorian Yates. So we're going back even further. This was before my time, but when I became a bodybuilder, I started researching a lot of, Dorian's training styles, his methodology, his mindset. Even like the quotes that he would say in his interviews were, like epic. A lot of them ran true with me because I'm not quite as a bodybuilding monk. I am a little bit, but I do like go out and socialize. I'm on social media, and Dorian probably wouldn't have been doing that in the early 90s. But in terms of like when it's gym time, in terms of prioritization of training and everything like that, I'm Dorian Yates. I mean, that's just how that it takes over your whole life. I isolate myself in terms of making sure I'm optimizing everything that day and everything in my life to make sure that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. So I do like the brutalness. And, Dorian wasn't the prettiest physique, but he also was absolutely like brutal on stage. So I kind of see that a bit more myself. I'm pretty big. I don't have the prettiest structure. I never will. It's just not in the genetic cards for me. And I let that notion go a long time ago. But there's a place for guys in bodybuilding to an extent. And I like that about him. The third one I got to say that I modeled myself off of was Branch Warren. Branch was around the same time as Jay Cutler. So he's recently retired. But Branch was crazy dense, crazy hard on stage. He had a good structure early in his career, but towards the end, he was blocky, and people kind of why I liked him is what I liked his training, no holds barred training style. He was out in Texas at Metroflex Arlington. There was no science behind it. He really didn't give a shit about that stuff, and he just was all out like a pit bull. Towards the weights. I really respected that. I identified with that. And one other thing that is Branch always got written off every show. He was never the guy that they said, oh, Branch Warren's in this show. He's probably going to win. It was always some other prettier physique. And if those guys came off, Branch was going to expose them on stage with his conditioning, with his brutal mass. And he's beaten a lot of guys, maybe most of the guys, that he probably shouldn't have beaten. And that's been like the telltale, that's been the notion of my whole career so far is, I've slipped past a lot of genetically superior guys because they were sleeping on their conditioning. They were sleeping on looking, I was just doing the extra work.
Love it, man. Who are a couple maybe guys right now in the IFBB currently that you kind of look up to, or you kind of just respect, whether it's their training style, their mentality, just how they carry themselves? Who are a few of the guys currently that you really look up to, you respect, and you follow, Gary?
Currently, I like I respect Roman Fritz, who just had his second hip surgery. I think about it maybe 6 months ago. He's already deadlifting like 5 plates. He's on the road to recovery. But I know Roman personally; he's a good friend. He is absolutely like a machine. So I respect that. I wish that I could live in Germany, just like live in like a spare bedroom with him. I have a family, but so it's obviously not going to happen. But if I was a single guy and that was an option, he would be a guy that I would definitely want to be linked up with. Hunter Labrada. Hunter is one. He is one of the most accessible pros right now. I mean, it's within social media compared to 10, 15 years ago. All these guys are accessible compared to what they were. But Hunter is very open. He's very transparent with his progress pics, his training, everything's logged. I personally know him. I would say strong acquaintances. I have his phone number and everything. I text him back and forth, but it's not like an everyday thing. And I just respect that it's the same guy that it was before he did his first show to when he, turned pro, won his first pro, just won his second pro show. So I don't think that, that's just a regular guy, but just very good at bodybuilding. You got to respect that. And the third one I'd say currently is another person I know personally, Nick Walker. And he's on the rise, and he's like a hot topic right now. I've seen Nick Walker when he wasn't good for years prior. He never was bad, but he had a lot of problems, and a lot of people said a lot of bad things about him. They said he would never turn pro, and they said even if he does, he'll never be a good pro. And he shut everybody up. He took fourth in his pro debut. That was 2 weeks after he turned pro at North Americans. Won the New York Pro. Nobody had him in for that. They'll say he's going to get swallowed in that lineup. And you got to respect somebody who doesn't give a damn what the experts are saying, the predictions are saying, and they go out and do it. And then on top of that, and I've messaged him personally about this, when he puts when these like RX Muscle and other media outlets put his progress pictures up, there's a lot of negativity in those comments. I mean, real negativity. Like, this guy's going to die. I mean, you don't think he's reading that? You're crazy. He's reading it. His family's reading it. It's got to be in the back of people's heads. So to be able to push through a prep, full throttle, do everything you need to do, be completely positive and mentally clear, and then win the New York Pro is really remarkable. With, he has a lot of support, but there's a lot of like grim shit being said about him. And then I mentioned, like, man, for you to hold that together and even not like lose 1% of sharpness or, as good as you can be, I'm like, that's something, man. So I really look up to him. He's on the rise. I don't think anybody should doubt him as much as like, well, he's never going to win the Olympia. I mean, he's been doubted every step of the way. Why are we going to start now? He seems to be shutting everybody up. He could be the top 3 at some point in his life.
Amen, man. I love it. That's why I love this podcast, is just, you bring bodybuilders on and we just talk bodybuilding, man. It's so good. Sometimes it's hard for me to not get get riled up and get going myself, because I'm such a bodybuilding fan and I compete myself. But it's not, this podcast isn't about me. It's about my guests. But it's just so fun, man, because it's like, when you're a fan of somebody or something and somebody else is a fan of somebody or something, it's just easy to kind of go back and forth. But definitely some awesome guys that you just talked about there. I just want to touch on here, Gary, and then we're going to get a little bit more into your backstory. But at what age did you start lifting weights, and then kind of what was the impetus or the reason behind you starting the weight training?
Yeah, so I went to college. I went to the University of Delaware. My first year was in 2005, 2006, and I didn't lift any weights. I was an athlete my whole life. I was a baseball player, wrestler, football player up until early high school. I was just like kind of the skinny fat kid, like skinny. I had skinny arms, skinny chest, skinny legs, but then I would have the out of shape gut. So I wasn't like a complete ectomorph. I just did not treat nutrition at all. I used to eat crappy. I would never like to lift weights. In class in high school, they used to send us to the weight room like during fitness week. And I'm like, this is horrible. I hate this. I did one set of abs and I just play a sport. So I always was practicing baseball, hitting, batting practice, pitching, whatever it may be. And so I was good at the sport, but I just did not like the calisthenics. I didn't like the training. I did not like the cardio or the running. So it wasn't until it was done with that, went to college, wasn't playing sports in college, and I put the freshman like 20 on. I was eating pizza every day, and I started to get really out of shape, like an inner tube gut kind of look. And I did not lift my first semester, left for winter break, and I said, I think when I go back to college, I'm going to try going to the gym. I'm just going to try to lose some fat off my stomach because I said to myself, I said, I think having abs is going to be too hard to do. So I just wanted to get it acceptable because I want to get for girls. So honestly, I don't have like a story where it's like, I was bullied or, and I rose above to try to like overcome the bullies or anything like that. And I wasn't some superstar like football player that was 250 pounds in senior year. I just honestly wanted to look better, for the parties, for the girls, and then it spiraled into the whole thing. I started getting compliments from people. I started feeding off that, and before you know it, I realized I don't really care about the compliments. This is all for me. This is part of my identity now. And in college, I looked more like a men's physique guy. I didn't really know about nutrition. I kind of ate like no carbs because I thought if you ate any carb, it would make you fat. Obviously, I didn't really know anything like that. And so I was like, I had the abs. I looked more like an Abercrombie, Hollister, men's physique type look. But I was known as the fitness guy on campus. So it wasn't like super jacked, like, large life or like competitive bodybuilding. It wasn't happening in college.
Cool. All right. So I want to kind of transition into where you grew up, kind of some of the younger years. I always kind of like to touch on that just because we all have a story, and who we are today is in large part of kind of, the childhood and those younger years. So where did you grow up, and just kind of paint a little bit of a picture of what the younger years were like for you, Gary? I know you touched on sports. So just touch on the younger years, maybe up to high school, and then we'll transition from there.
Yeah. So I grew up in Edison, New Jersey. That's central New Jersey. And the typical, family, mom, dad, middle class. Had a very good childhood, and my parents did everything that they could for me. We played all sports. I played football from age 6, baseball from age 5. Started wrestling in 6th grade, which was just a random idea that the wrestling coach at the middle school was like, hey, you should be a wrestler. And I said, okay. And I thought it was actually like WWE wrestling. And when I went home, my dad was like, it's not like that. It's a whole different thing. It's real wrestling. But I liked it a lot. One of my biggest regrets was not wrestling in high school because I was slated to be a varsity starter as a freshman. And honestly, and I regret it now as a 33-year-old guy not doing it. I kind of punked out because of the conditioning and the cardio behind it. I was a good wrestler, but if I didn't pin you in the first 2 periods, I was going to gas out and probably lose. That all could have been changed, more work ethic, more street work and stuff like that. But I wasn't the same guy, at 11, 12, 13, 14 years old that I am at 33. And to be honest with you, I just had this conversation with my mom, and it ties into high school too. I'm known for my discipline bodybuilding. I mean, I weigh everything to the gram. If I don't have exactly what I need, I'll go to the food store to get it, even if I could substitute something out. I'm very meticulous, probably neurotic, you would say. But I'm not like that in any other aspect of my life. It's because I'm very passionate about bodybuilding. It's all because, and I just discussed with my mom, I have mediocre genetics. I understood from an early lifting age that I don't have crazy superior genetics where I can get by with it. So I always said, I have to make $1 out of 75 cents. So that was embedded in my head. I didn't think that back when I was a child. I didn't think, well, you're pretty good at baseball, but you could be better. I mean, the one other kid, he's a little bit better. So outwork him and then you'll be the best hitter on the team. I didn't think that. I was just like, well, I'm good. That's it. Let's go to the game. So it was just a different mindset. So I don't know, like, I was passionate about baseball. I loved it, especially passionate about football. Loved it. I don't know if that work ethic and discipline might have been just a development of my maturity over the years, just as a person. rather than like, and I think you could see that sort of thing as at a young kid. But I was a 3-sport athlete. I was an honor roll student. So I was pretty good at everything, and this ties also into bodybuilding. I was always pretty good at everything, but I was never like the guy. So I was always like maybe the leader in the sports, but the newspapers weren't always this high school's got Gary Turner, starting this year, and they're like in the league preview, same way a Branch Warren was, and the same thing translated over to bodybuilding. When I first started out, I was written off. There was nothing. I believed in myself, and I knew that one day I would get to where I am today. I visualized that. Nobody else thought that. It's not their job to think that anyway. It's only my dream. It's vision. When I get there. But it's the same thing. I've never been like the talk of the town in bodybuilding, and I probably never will. And I've accepted that. But I'm going to slide past you if you're not going to go just harder than I am. So that's, yeah. I mean, it's typical childhood.
Yeah. Now I wanna dissect a little bit before we get kind of back into your story, but just the discipline thing, because I find that fascinating, Gary, where you talked about kind of like you were a decent athlete, but you didn't really seem like there was a lot of maybe discipline to put in extra work or anything like that. But then when it came to the bodybuilding, like you kind of like thrive on the discipline of bodybuilding and the lifestyle. So do you think that that discipline, it really came to fruition through the bodybuilding, and just kind of like what has that kind of given you or added to your life, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I do think it came through fruition through the bodybuilding thing. I don't think it's some innate characteristic that I have from birth. Reason being, my dad is like a very practical guy, and my car is messy. It's not like it's not like OCD, everything's washed and stuff like that. One would think that somebody is meticulous and disciplined with bodybuilding. He answered, if you're like this with bodybuilding, why aren't you like this with the car? Why aren't you like this with the leaves on the front lawn? I said, and this is going to sound like kind of bad, but I was like, because I don't care. I only care about bodybuilding. That's where it's passion. It's where at any point, at any time, I would want to be bodybuilding. So people say, you haven't taken a vacation? You and I'm like, if you told me to go to the gym, that's where I want to be. It's not, whereas most people would want to take a vacation, go to a tropical island. I would rather honestly take a trip to a gym or a bodybuilding show, and just that's just that I like. So the discipline, I think, came from the passion mixed with the understanding that I am not perfectly genetic. And I've always questioned, when you see like great genetically shaped guys that are not in shredded shape, and you say, man, if I had those guys' genetics, I'd be Mr. Olympia. Yeah, that's true. The problem is that if you had the genetics that person had, knowing that, you might not work as hard as you did because it was instilled in your brain. Everybody told you from an early age that you're great. Nobody told me that. So you kind of had to like make up for it. So it's kind of like a chicken or the egg. Are those guys great genetics and a byproduct is like mediocre work ethic, and then the guys that have crazy work ethic, is that a byproduct of them understanding that they have mediocre genetics? The only people that I've ever seen have crazy both was Ronnie Coleman. Ronnie Coleman had top-notch, top Olympia level genetics, psycho with the training, probably too much. We all know what his status is now. But he said from many times, Flex Wheeler should have killed him on all the shows, but Flex Wheeler did not work that hard. And Flex Wheeler probably had the best genetics ever bodybuilding. So I think that it really came through with just the bodybuilding, because I'm not like crazy disciplined with like the lawn and stuff, and it doesn't translate to all aspects of my life. However, if I do care about something, I will like it. So I do care about my job. I'm employed with Animal Pack as well as sponsor with them. When I go to work, I take that very seriously. And that's just not because I'm getting a paycheck, to finance my whole family. It's because I have passion for the brand, and I have passion, and I take it personally. So there's passion there. I care about there. The hard work is there. So, if I worked for like Microsoft, and I've worked for companies that like, it was just a check. It was just a nice check. I didn't give a shit. I just gave a shit enough to make sure that I didn't get fired and the check came through. So I believe in everything that you do, you should have passion for.
So piggybacking right off of what you just said, talking about the passion, because I truly believe, passion is everything in life. So in regards to bodybuilding, like, what is it? Is it something that you can kind of put your finger on, Gary? Like, what is it actually that makes you so passionate about bodybuilding?
Yeah. There's a lot of things, and a couple of these reasons might be vain, but they are the truth. So I'll be honest about it. One of them is attention, and I've always been a kid that thrived on attention. So I always had to be the funny man, or I tried to be the best athlete, on the sport. I kind of always was a little bit, not like a show off in terms of like bragging or anything, and not like that. More so just I liked whenever it was like they noticed me. It just kind of was that's from a very early childhood thing. So I started noticing when I started even lifting weights when I was at school. When I came home, the people at home were like, "Oh, you got bigger," and I liked that attention. So I trained hard while I was on break at home because I wanted the friends that were back at college to notice that when I came back here for 2 months, you're bigger, and I fed through that. So the attention I love when now because of my current size, of course, attention is a lot. If people approach me in the food store, I love it. Even if they make like a funny joke, I love it. Like, hey, what am I doing wrong? How come my arms don't look like that? I love that. I love when people ask me for pictures and they always kind of enter with, "Hey, I don't mean to bother you. Can I grab a picture?" That would never bother me. That person, by asking me that, made my day. You asked me to be on this podcast, made my day. So it's like it's a lot of there is a tension involved with it, but then there's also a personal challenge. In the beginning, I was doubted, whether it be behind my back or right to my face. I've had many times, where people just like straight up trashed me on forums, open posts on, if the shouldn't go as well. And so there was a lot of, I wanted to prove people wrong. I had a chip on my shoulder, and that drove me for a while. So it was a very lonely road, which was just me and my family, a couple friends, but for the most part, nobody really it was just like pay no mind type thing. I understand now why, because I didn't really have anything that was noteworthy. Oh, but now present day, when I've gotten to the level, now of course the attention has increased. I've arrived, so to speak, and now there's a lot of positive attention, way more than the negative, stuff that comes towards me. So even if you get negative stuff, I block the person within seconds. There's no room for that anymore. And my driving force now is to prove the supporters right, not prove the doubters wrong. So there's not like a negative connotation to my training where I'm walking around angry all the time. It's for all the people that took the time out to say, you look great at your show, or I think you're going to do really well. I want to prove my family was going to be in the stands right, rather than shove it down everybody's throat with massive success, that sort of thing. So it kind of, it changed over the years. These are, a lot of the driving forces that keep me in the game. And I say last, a lot of people ask me about like, how do you stay motivated? Oh, I said, well, one, I love it. But if the motivation does wane, it's very rare, but if it does, that's when the discipline takes over. I can't look myself in the mirror if I said, I don't feel like going to the gym, I don't feel like eating that meal, and then go and look at myself with pride. I have a lot of pride in myself. So I just take care of business. You just rise up. So I mean, it's something that you could say to somebody. I don't know if they're gonna take like your advice if they don't have that in them, so, but that's the truth. I haven't missed a meal. I've never missed a meal in a contest prep. I've never missed a training or cardio in a contest prep. I pride myself on that, but that's because I could never like skip cardio and be like, look myself in the mirror and be like, you're doing everything that you can. Your chances of winning the show are pretty slim, even if you do everything. Why would you ever think that you're going to win by doing less than 100%? So, that's like my theory. And that's, now that I have that reputation, it's even easier because it's like, I just run with it. This is what I'm known for. So do it.
For sure. All right. So before we kind of dive into just literally everything bodybuilding in terms of talking about training, nutrition, and competition and all of that stuff, you did mention that you went to the University of Delaware. So just touch on maybe like the college years. What did you study? Did you graduate? And then let's just kind of transition from there, Gary, into bodybuilding, when you got into it, and kind of the history for you in terms of your personal bodybuilding experience.
Yeah. So I went to the University of Delaware. I did graduate in 2009. My parents threatened me the entire time that I only have 4 years, and if I don't do it, I'm a dead man. There's a lot of loans taken out. My college years were, I was a criminal justice major. The plan was to be a cop coming out of college, or was attempting to be. I was in a fraternity, Kappa Sigma. I was a big partier. So I lifted, I dieted to look good, but I was drinking 5 nights a week. This is not something that's conducive to bodybuilding, but I was not even considering bodybuilding at this time. And even so, when I hear very young guys, I speak with a lot of young guys that are college age, and they say, should I do a show? I said, are you in college? Yes. Are you the type of person, I said, are you the type of person that likes to go to parties? Is that your life right now? And if they say yes, then I say, then don't do the body. Not right now. I said, you should use those years, if that's what you like to do, to hang with your friends, to drink, party, get girls, whatever it is. If that's that's you. And that's what I was into. I got that out of my system. And like I said, all my fraternity brothers, we were still in the gym. We had a Bowflex at the house, pumping up before the party. We were the meatheads on campus, but we weren't counting the grains of rice and making sure that our glutes were striated so that we can get on stage. That wasn't even a concern, even for me, and I was the most hardcore guy. But if there's a young guy who comes to me and says, listen, I go to a community college, I'm just there to get, I go to class and then I work and I live at home, and I'm a teen or early 20s, and bodybuilding is my thing. I don't drink. I don't like to drink. I'm kind of a, individual type. That I said, you could do a show. Because your life is just more lined up for that. So yeah, I was interested in bodybuilding. I had the Flex magazine. I had the Muscular Development magazines. I watched the YouTube videos. I was enhanced then, and I'm very honest with that sort of thing. I started in college. And we, basically I went and graduated. I had a girlfriend of 5 years that was from high school through college. So she knew me and she started dating me when I was a skinny kid. That's what she liked. That's what she expected. And I kind of flipped the script on her with the gym. That wasn't really her thing. However, I was still kind of a mainstream look, and I was a little bit more balanced. Like I wasn't like bringing Tupperware everywhere. I just kind of, if we went out to eat, like I would get a salad, something like that. And I looked good. Like I looked very mainstream. I had the abs, so she liked it. She was very anti bodybuilding on stage. Like I said, well, why don't you come to a show? We could sit in the stand. You'd see that it's not a vain thing. These are athletes, and you could see, maybe you could change your opinion. Would not do it. It's okay. I kept putting it away, saying, you don't want to bodybuild. You want to be with her. You don't want to bodybuild. Fast forward to like in 2009, joined a hardcore gym in Edison, New Jersey called the Pollen Gym. It's where all the bodybuilders were. It was like the grunge type thing. And it was great. I met, who is now my best friend. I was in his wedding, Frank Manarino. He was a teen competitor at the time. He's 30 now, but he was 17 then. And he convinced me after training and talking about it, because you should do a show. And I was like, that's not really my thing. And then he worked on me, and I knew I wanted to do a show, but I didn't know how to tell my girlfriend. So I ended up on Thanksgiving of all time, she randomly asked me after Thanksgiving dinner, do you want to do a bodybuilding show? And I said, and in my head, I said, this is my chance. I have to say something. I said, yeah, well, I have one planned for next June of 2010. She said, you know, we can't date if you do that. I said, I know. And we broke up right there and I left. And so that was like the end of it. So with that sort of thing. And I started, you know, my first prep started at the beginning of March of 2010.
All right. So basically you chose bodybuilding over a girl then, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
I love it, man. That's good. That's good. That's a good
And it
way.
was a long relationship. It wasn't like three, it wasn't like a 3-month relationship either. It was 5.5 years.
Right, right. Yeah. And that's a great way to kind of segue into just your bodybuilding career and experience up to this point. So you said you started, you competed in 2010. So just maybe touch on how that first competition went, and then just kind of unpack, maybe, I know you've competed a lot, but just maybe touch on some of the highlights of your competition history, and we'll just kind of continue to converse from there.
Yeah. So yeah, I started that prep, and it was from the owner of that hardcore gym was my first coach. So I didn't really know anything about it. I didn't even to buy trunks out of that, but I did know how the shows were ran because he made me go sit and watch some local shows. We were training. It wasn't like how it is now, where it's like every Tuesday you're going to check in. It was more like, hey, I need to take a look at you randomly when he was at the gym. And it was about 6 weeks out, and he goes, let me take a look at you. And I was very, very fat for 6 weeks out. He goes, oh boy. I did fish and greens every meal with 75 2 times a day on the Stairmaster. The most not what you want to do. I was acceptable on stage in the light heavyweight category. I went from a fat 200, very fat 253 to 178 pounds. The show was in New York City, in Tribeca, when it used to be there. It was the Atlantic States. It was one of the biggest regional shows, still is, but it was huge then. When I got out of the show, I was happy. It was instilled in me very early on that you don't cheat on your diet, you don't miss cardio, and it's still carrying on. I don't know what made me do that right away, but I did it right. I did follow everything. There was no screwing around. I remember it was back in those days where you would check in the morning of, and then they'd weigh you in like while everybody was there. It wasn't the night before where you get all your stuff and then you show up to pre-judging. So they say light heavyweights line up to weigh in. We all strip down, and I look around, and if you remember the pro Marco Rivera, well, he wasn't a pro then. He was in my class and he won the whole class. I looked around and said, oh boy, maybe I made a mistake, because they all looked like him and they were all experienced, and there was 26 light heavyweights. So, but I had the time of my life, to be honest. I got floored. Obviously I didn't place anything. I got floored. It was very tough because we cut water, and like I did like diuretics, and it wasn't like the best way because I wasn't used to what I was feeling. I mean, we cut water like 9 a.m. Friday. Very not what you want to do. But it was still a good experience. There was 2 ways that it could have went when you got crushed like that. Either you quit and say, this was a complete waste of time. I'm never doing this again. Why would I want to do this? But I say, you know what? I only did that one show, and I said, I'm going to take off 2011 and I'm going to come back much better. And that's what I did. So I was hooked after that. So I'm kind of thankful for that ass kicking. It's funny to look back on it. It was a rough show. And, you know, I'd say probably the highlight. Now, I've won a few local shows. I placed top at Junior USA's in 2016. But I got to say the show from the weekend was the highlight, where I placed top 5 at the USA's in the super heavy. One, it was my all-time best look. So even if it wasn't in the top 5, it was an all-time best look. I never looked like that before. But it was just kind of surreal to see in the first call out and everything like that, that you belong there. After last year, I did North Americans last year and I got clocked. It was COVID. I was like, in my buddy's basement. I was illegally in a couple of gyms that were far from my house. It just wasn't ideal. And I really had a bad look that year at North Americans. To rebound that and come back and take fifth in at the USA's, in a show that probably nobody would have ever thought that I would do, was like I was on a high. And then, now I'm at 4 weeks from North Americans, which I know that I'll be even better for that. But I got to say that those two, like I said, I've won shows before. Those are a rush, but those were smaller shows. I'm kind of expected to win those shows, and it feels great, to win them. But like everybody forgets, by the next day, I forget the next day. I put the trophy down and it's on to the next one. So I got to say this last one was the best one.
So I want you to talk about, because I've been reading through some of your recent posts, Gary, on your Instagram, kind of discussing the North Americans from 2020, and then just the process of leading up to USA's here just recently. But for the listeners, just talk about your mindset, because we know that mindset, whether it's bodybuilding or in life, is everything, right? And if somebody wants to be successful at whatever they're pursuing, whatever they're passionate about, like it's going to start with the mind. So how did you kind of handle, maybe not showing up at North Americans last year the way that you wanted? How did you handle that kind of in the moment? And then, just what was the process that you had to go through with your mind to kind of say, hey, like, I'm going to bounce back better than ever? So just walk us from the North Americans last year, kind of the mindset then to the mindset through the process when you stepped on stage last weekend for the USA's.
Okay. I'll start even like a slightly before the North Americans, because the mindset was off for that. Even so, while we're in COVID, I knew that Nick Walker was going to be in the class. I thought I was going to be a super heavy at North Americans. Last year, I ended up dropping the heavy, so it wasn't even a concern. But most of them, I got really big that off season before. I was 308, not good 308. I was chunky. So, well, for sure, you're going to be a super heavy. Look how heavy you are. And I knew Nick Walker was in the show, so I was like very pitting myself mentally against Nick Walker, which was a huge mistake. You should never do that. And obviously, I wasn't in the same class, but he would have killed me if we were. He looked unbelievable, and then he leveled up later on after that. But it's a bad mindset to have this gladiator mindset of that guy's in my class, that guy's in my class, because there's no defense in bodybuilding. It's not like football where you have to study the defense so you can, as an offense, could do something that does better than them, or vice versa. It doesn't matter what you do on stage. You have to be shredded. You have to look right, and you just hope that that's better than the other guy. It's not like you can screw the other guy up or something like that, and so it doesn't. So worrying about them is a problem. It only can be negative, because we're all going to train 100%. I would train 100% if I knew that I was going to be the only guy on stage and I knew there was no competitors. So thinking about Nick Walker, thinking about the other guys that I was heard through the grapevine was wrong. Combine that that off season, I was motivated to do things differently. I wasn't going to get that fat. So Dave Palumbo is my coach, and we kept it not very tight, but pretty tight. Instead of 308, I went to 270. And I was smoother at 270, but much more acceptable. I changed my training. So now I went with a complete progressive overload, high intensity, low volume. I kept a log book. I beat all my lifts. I knew every rep was recorded. I knew, okay, you're doing too much volume here, which I was a huge aimless volume guy in the gym. Big mistake. Burn muscle off. I wasn't optimizing recovery. So I became more scientific than I usually were but as reviewing this logbook. Started prep for the USA's in April of this year, and I kept that logbook. So now we're doing much more efficient work coming down. I incorporated different methods where last year I was doing 2 hours of cardio, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour on treadmill, which is high intensity. Well, it's kind of high intensity. My legs disappeared just walking at 3.2 for that long. This year I incorporated with a Fitbit the step counter. So I have a step count. I slowly worked up, and we know that is not high intensity. You're just walking slow, but as long as you get the total amount, it'll burn the calories. That required me, when I presented my progress pictures to be leaner. Therefore, the treadmill cardio didn't have to go as high. I'm only at 45 minutes right now. I've been at 30 to 45 minutes for the whole prep one time a day. That's very easy for me. That's like taking a multivitamin. That's how automatic that is. And then I walk. I go to the food store. Like the food store is down the road from my house. I walk there. I don't drive. I get my steps in for that. So that helped me that combined with the progressive overload, it's a fuller look. It's not as beat down. It's not as tired looking, which I always usually have a kind of a tired look because I usually go through like hell to get into shape. So this is where the difference was. In terms of the mindset though, I told myself I wasn't going to worry about anybody. I said, my mindset is not, you have to win or you're a complete failure. And that's where I was before. And that's a bad way to think. The only guy should ever think that is the guy that was second place last year. He wants to get first. That's his improvement. I did not place last year. I was in the third out of fourth call out. If I got into the second call out, that's a success, along with my best look ever. Anything past that is even bigger success. So I kept my scope small and I kept my goals smaller. Some people don't think like, oh, you're just going for second call. Yeah, but we're training 100% still, but I'm just doing that to not overwhelm myself mentally. So, and I had the first call for the USA is great. Now, I think that the lineup is going to be a bit deeper for the North Americans. My goal is, again, can you make, if you have 20 supers, can you make it in the second call out? Can you make it in the first call out? They're all successes because I'm going to be my best look. But as long as I'm not in the third call out this year, then we've improved from North Americans to North Americans. So I'm keeping that mindset, small scope, and not like looking around like, okay, that guy's good, so he might be first. That knocks me down to second. Oh wait, that knocks me down. We're at third, and before you know, you the show didn't happen. You count it yourself out because you're pinpointing your competition. A, you don't know what they really look like. B, you don't know what it's gonna be like. And C, when I did not place last year, and I thought, man, it would have been really nice to be 10th place at this show, or not 8th place at this show. That would have been a huge jump. You got to think about it. There's still 7 guys ahead of him that beat him. So why am I pinpointing the guy I think is going to win, the guy I think is going to be second? If I wouldn't even be mad if I got 6th. So stop selecting all of them and just let it fall. So I cleared my mind that way. It worked out for USA's. I think it'll work out even better for North Americans. But I keep my expectations low because regardless if my expectations are high or low, I'm still going to train 1,000%. I'm still going to eat the food exactly how I'm supposed to do. It's not like I'm going to go less intense because I'm not trying to do as well. So I don't know. It's a little trick that I've been doing, but it's been working so far this year.
That sounds great, man. I think, bodybuilding specifically, there's so much, individual or personal growth that can happen through the experience of bodybuilding if you're open to it, right? So I think that's some powerful insight, and I appreciate you sharing that, Gary. Now you brought up Dave Palumbo, and then you mentioned your first coach that you had back in 2010. I would love to kind of hear your perspective, Gary, on coaching. Right nowadays, we've got coaches with coaches underneath them, and we got these big teams, and there's a lot going on, especially with social media. I think the coaching game has really changed, and there's some people that shouldn't be coaches. But I don't really necessarily want to focus on that. I want to focus on your perspective in terms of, do you truly believe if you want to reach your fullest potential in bodybuilding, you need a coach? And then just maybe touch on some of your experiences with some of the coaches you've had.
Yeah, I do believe that everybody should have a coach. Most of us are hypercritical, especially when it comes to ourselves. So we're not going to pull the trigger, or we think we kind of go more on want rather than need. And then sometimes you go and you overshoot the need. For me, if I coach myself, I would run myself into the ground in cardio because I'm tough, and I would keep going. And that is a mistake. And I need an experienced eye to say, Gary, no more cardio. And I'll listen because I'm very, very following orders. the coach says jump, you say how high. But I need to make sure it's the right coach. Otherwise you're following poor orders. So I had my first coach. He was the owner of Apollo and Gym. We did the first 3 years together. So 2010 to 2013. Our best placing. I mean, I won a novice show with him. Took second in the open, and then I took 10th at my first national show, which was junior nationals in 2013. I switched coaches after I took 2014 off, got heavy, switched coaches to the late Matt Porter, who passed away in 2019. So that we worked together, me and Matt, for 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. I usually didn't work with him in the off season. I kind of did my own thing, and then we would meet up for prep. Matt taught me a lot about being crazy and suffering during prep, so that, like, because he was tough. You were training a lot. It was very intense. The amount of conditioning that he demanded, because he himself was that way, was exemplary. And but it taught me, I mean, my first prep with him in 2015, from 12 weeks out, we were doing 4 sessions in the gym because he would not let the cardio be backed up to the workout. So I did 3 hit sessions on cardio and 1 training session, 7 days a week. That was his thing. I know I probably wouldn't do that, but I was doing 27 minutes in the morning fasted, 27 minutes at lunch. Then I would train at 5:30 after work. And then I would come back about 10:30 and do another 27 minutes. This is also while eating only 50 grams of carbs and trace fats, which was crazy. My wife was pregnant at the time. We had the baby at 6 weeks out. I was in the hospital when baby was born at 4:31. Was it 4:31 or 4:37? 4:37. I had to get that right. And I left the hospital after at 8:30 and trained legs. That's not to show off. I know that probably nobody else will do that. I would not have done that if I was off season, but I was 6 weeks out, and I wanted to prove to Matt that I'm committed. I'm not some scrub. I knew that he thought that I was committed, but he wasn't sure how good I was. And I was always after trying to prove to him that I was somebody. And, after a while, I had his respect for that. And we went on to a few more preps. Our best placing being the Junior USA's 2016, where I took 5th. And like I said, he taught me a lot about suffering and like normalizing it, where most of these people implode. After he passed away, I was in search for a coach. My buddy trained with Dave Palumbo, and I liked his simplistic approach. He's old school. He will feed you when is necessary. He won't just aimlessly make you suffer, but he will push you when it's time, as he did last year. This time, it's a little bit more calculated because there's a lot more freedom because I'm a lot leaner. But so working with Dave is a better look, but my life is a lot more balanced. So I think that Matt, the portion of my life, really set me up for that sort of success with Dave. And yeah, there's a lot of coaches, and you really got to figure out what they're like. I'm not just talking about dieting strategies, because most good coaches should be flexible based on the person. They should sort of have their own nuances, but they should be able to adjust it to you based on, like, because every one of our bodies are different. You should need to figure it out. I think that you need to also find what kind of coach, like their customer service, if it lines up with your personality. Some people are very needy, especially the noobs in this industry. They want their diets changed every time. I mean, Dave did not change my diet this entire prep. It still didn't change. There's been different days where he saw things, he goes, okay, go to this diet, but he didn't like lower anything. He didn't sub anything out. He didn't do anything like that. He definitely didn't change anything my whole off season. It was the same diet the whole time. And every time I checked in, which was 2 times a week, he went, you look good, keep the same. And me as an experienced guy, that's a good thing. Is that the fact that he's not changing anything is a good thing. It means everything's on point. A lot of the newer athletes might say, he just took my money and then he's just not doing it. He's not even looking at pictures just stay the same. And then I paid all this money for, I didn't even need to do it. That's a bad mindset. If your coach nowadays, some of these coaches flip everything around. They put 8 ounces of potato instead of 1 cup of rice. And that's just to trick their clients to think that they're pulling some kind of voodoo shit. And it's so that the client thinks that my coach has the secret. Your coach doesn't have the secret. If your coach has the eye, that's what they need. And then some coaches take a while to respond. Some coaches will be like holding your hand if that's their style, like you'll be at your show. I've never had a coach at my show. Of all 3 coaches I've had, I've always been alone at the shows and relaying pictures back. So you have to like find what kind of coach, how local they are. The more local that they are, the probably more chance that you'll be friendly with them and they'll be at your shows. The bigger they are, unless you're like an Olympia competitor, they're probably not. And you need to, and one thing I learned is don't judge who the coach that you're based on what you see on social media on how they treat their pros. That's their elite guys. That's their thoroughbred horse. As long as they're treating you fairly and you're getting the right advice, and then that's good. But they're not going to have you in their house at the show, taking care of you like their Olympia competitors are. So don't judge them or buy their package thinking that it's going to go like that for you. Chances are they probably work also for a while together and they're friends. So there's a personal relationship with them. You don't get that right from the beginning. So I learned very quickly that just get somebody who's telling you the right shit and they're responding to you in a timely manner, not 2 days later, not even like, I'd say Dave probably is like about 8 hours, unless we're very close. Then I start texting him, and I'll be like, "Here's my picture for that," because I need to know. Other than while I'm on the treadmill, sometimes things are a little bit urgent that quick, where I need to know, well, am I doing this diet? Like when I finish this, what am I cooking for meal 1? I can't like wait, for you to check your email 5 hours later. So that it changes, but I think that people should have a coach. I think that most people don't have a clue what they're doing, whether it's in the gym or eating. And I think that these coaches can save them a lot of time of trial and error. And I think that's how it goes.
Wise words, man. Appreciate that. Now I want to touch on who you work for and your sponsor, Universal Animal. Man, I tell you what, like back in the early 2000s and stuff, when I was really starting to get into bodybuilding, I'd open up the Muscular Development or whatever magazine, and you'd have those animal pack ads with like Frank McGrath and Evan Senapati. Yeah. It's legendary stuff, man. I literally, because of those magazine advertisements, I'd go to GNC, I'd get the animal pack, vitamins, and it's just a lot of the younger people that are just now getting into bodybuilding don't really realize or understand the history of animal and really how influential it was. I think especially back in the maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, like it really influenced a whole generation. I'm 34, so you and I are about the same age, and so I think people around our age that got into bodybuilding back when we did really saw the power of those animal ads, right? Just like shut up and train. But the point that I kind of want to get to is, when did you start working for Animal Pack, Gary? And then just kind of talk about your experience, because you've had opportunities to brush shoulders with the athletes for Animal and be a part of a historic company. So just touch on those experiences if you don't mind.
Yeah, started working for Animal in 2013. How that came out, obviously, they're based out of New Brunswick, New Jersey, which is about 10 minutes from Edison, which is where I grew up. I was in that hardcore gym, Apollon gym. Like I said, I was working the front desk. I worked a bunch of part-time jobs, kind of pieced it all together. And one of the customer service reps, who I know very well, and I'll get into that in a second, he quit. The manager, Eric Schwartz, who was, he trains, and he came into Apollon, asked the owner of Apollon, "Hey, we need to fill somebody. Do you know anybody who would be interested in the job?" The owner, who was my trainer at the time, said, "What about Gary? He needs a full-time job." And I went in for the interview and I got it. Eric knew me from the gym and from bodybuilding, and I always wanted to be sponsored by Animal. When I saw Eric, I always, like I was training, I used to call him the scout. I thought he was scouting athletes. He was just like trying to get his lift in. I thought he had contracts, like blank contracts in his gym bag. And if he sees somebody, he could just like offer you a contract. So I always like try to pose around him. And it was like obviously very like ignorant and naive. But they hired me for customer service. It was my first like official like full-time with benefit job. So it was great. I never, and even till this day, never felt like I ever went to work. I never like struggled with that sort of thing because it's always what I was interested in. You know, we're around the supplements. You know, of course, we're doing real work. And I also branched not only the customer service into the writing. I don't know if you see my Instagram. I kind of write that hardcore lingo and stuff like that. I do all the writing for Animal now. All the hardcore lifestyle that you see on social media. If you ever like look and kind of like look at my personal page and look at like, it kind of sounds like Gary. It's because it's me. So I handle everything like that. I MC the cage. So at the Arnold, I do the microphone. I do all the announcing, the screaming, everything like that. That came about in 2017. And I wasn't made an athlete until 2018. That was something that I always wanted. And for years, I was always told, you're an employee. You're never going to be an athlete. You're not an athlete. And I used to watch from afar. I used to watch Frank McGrath, and I knew them all. You know, I'm friends with them, and I watched them. How are they handling fans? How are they taking pictures? They're signing autographs. You know, how are they carrying themselves? What do they look like? What are they wearing? And I would study those guys. And I said, when my chance comes, I'm going to know exactly what to do. You know, and I'm going to handle fans a certain way. And I ended up working my way. Everyone knew that I wanted to be an athlete, and they ended up extending that role in 2018, where I was put under contract. It was like in addition to working with it, so it was like I was an athlete. You know, there's some perks to that, and then of course there's an employee aspect where I still report to work, which is great. So when I go to those events, like there's a lot of times I have athlete roles as well as like MC roles. I really don't work behind the counter at like the Arnold anymore. But now there is pictures involved. There is autographs, and I have posters and stuff like that. So, you know, a lot of people have said to me, you still remain so humble and you always like to take pictures. I said, I will take pictures till the middle of the night with you, because I stood there while nobody gave a shit enough to ask me that. If I said to myself, if I ever get that opportunity or that status, that I would make sure I take care of everybody. I would never big league somebody, because I've been there where somebody like brushed off as like a fan and it didn't feel good and I didn't want to. So like it could be the most non-bodybuilding peer, and I will have a full-on conversation with them at these things, probably too long, you know, but it's just I'll pull you into the conversation instead of being standoffish. And that's my personality, but that's also me understanding that that's how you have to interact with people, rather than just be like, you know, like the typical boring bodybuilder. Yeah, I just like to, you know, eat my food and then, you know, go to the gym, you know, or like not take pictures with people. That's also, I think it's complete bullshit, more so than other sports. Bodybuilding needs to be on the same level. We're all lifting the same dumbbells. We're all lifting the same, we're all competing the same way. We're just at different levels. So it's not like when you meet Eli Manning or Peyton Manning, those guys are quarterbacks in the NFL. We're not random, like lower level quarterbacks. We don't play football, but we all lift weights. We're all bodybuilders in some sense of the way. So don't talk down to those guys. You're going to see them in the gym next to you, rubbing shoulders with them. Represent, lead the right way, so they respect you. They respect the industry and sport, and they have a like, you know, a role model to kind of go after, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in regards to like some of just the, maybe the, because we touched on kind of in the opening, we talked about some of your some of the bodybuilders that you kind of looked up to in the past and then current day, but maybe some of the guys that you've brushed shoulders with within, you know, Animal, you know, whether it's present or past, that have maybe had some influence on you. Touch on some of those athletes, if you don't mind, Gary.
Well, we mentioned Roman Fritz. He was with Animal. That's how I met him. So of course, that's where I was able to train with him. Very good friends with Evan Centopani right now. I respect everything that he says. He's on a different level in terms of like intellect with bodybuilding and like life. He's a very practical person, very smart, and very sound mind. So if you need advice, you can go to Evan and he'll probably tell you the right thing. Um, with that, he has been where we're all trying to go. He's been, as I think he took 8th at the Olympia, was his highest placing, but that's still up there. And so he's been to those mountaintops. He's been in the ads. He's looked the way that's the massive size that we've wanted to look like, and he has the fan base to back it up. So he's everything, that I kind of try to model myself off of, because he is not the meatheads bodybuilder. Also good friends with former athlete Frank McGrath. Frank is still one of the most popular animal athletes, and he's not even on our staff anymore, because of those posters and everything that they say that made like Frank's whole career. Because Frank has, the last show Frank's won was his pro card, which is fine. It's not in the cards for everybody to be a perfect stage bodybuilder, but Frank was a perfect bodybuilder at a perfect time for the company that fit perfectly for him. And I like the art behind that whole thing, because I like the writing. It was before my time, but I like the writing about the journey and the lifestyle. And these are all things that, like, obviously was done by a company, but it's stuff that happens in my real life, at least. I know it's a photo shoot, but the stuff that was written in there at 4:51 a.m., everyone else is hitting the snooze button and I'm getting meal too. And that's like my life, So it's like, I respected how Frank did that. I respected Frank's freak factor, at his craziest. And I'm always inspired by like the fan base that he has. Frank has a long line. Evan has long lines too, but Frank, they go nutty for. The only person I've ever seen like a longer line, like up close, and because he walked over to talk to Frank, was Callum Von Monger. He just came over because they were friends, and then all of a sudden the line just like appeared. So obviously Callum, wherever he goes, he gets good attention. But Frank does too. And I think that he's maximized. And he's also a very, very down to earth, normal dude. They both are, but Frank, like, you play video games with him, he jokes around. He's not like one of these, like, even though he's well known, some of these superstars are like hard to, like, they treat you like a fan, and it. Frank doesn't treat us like a fan. He just treats us like, what's up, Gary? You got a show coming up? Like that sort of thing. And I like that. So, it was a privilege to be able to rub shoulders with him.
That's awesome, man. It's always cool, especially for somebody like myself who's just a fan of bodybuilding. It's always cool to talk to people kind of like yourself who, you're kind of behind the curtain, behind the scene, especially with a company like Animal. So I appreciate you touching on that. We're gonna kind of head toward the finish line here, Gary, with our conversation, but there's a few things I want to touch on before we do wrap things up. What's kind of your ultimate goal in terms of bodybuilding? Are you pursuing that IFBB pro card? And if so, just touch on that. If not, just wrap up in kind of like what your long-term vision or goal or pursuit is with bodybuilding.
Yeah, and this evolved over time. The end goal for me is the pro card. It's not past that. It took years to be able to rationalize myself that I'm not going to be Mr. Olympia. When I was 22, I thought, well, it's not happening yet, but it will. And I didn't really understand like the concept of like Olympia genetics. But I think, and I know that I couldn't be a good pro. I'd probably end up killing myself, even if I got a pro card, trying to compete in the pro ranks. And when I say kill myself, I don't mean I kill myself from there. I mean actually deceased. I'm like I said, I'm very open. I'm full throttle right now trying to get the pro card, and we're scratching at trying to get it. And I think I can, but after that, what am I going to do? Double everything? I'll really be dead. So that's not worth it. So I've let go of those notions. And it's just because of shape. Now you're in another league with elite shape with people are probably will be taking less than you because they're just more gifted than you. That's okay. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's just, it is what it is. My goal is just to win the pro card. And I don't care how I get it, whether it be at North Americans in 3.5 weeks. And then I turned 35, I turned 34 in October, so I can't do Masters yet. But next October of 2022, I will be 35. And then Masters shows are an option. And I really logically think that at one of these Masters 35 plus shows, they're tough. The guys are good, but so am I. And it's not the open class. I think that I can land in the winner's circle. And at that point, it's a job well done. Your goal's stamped. Nobody can ever take it away from you. And I think that at that point, I would fold up shop and then probably, let it go. Because, I also have a family that would like me to be a little bit normal at some point. And if that's the farthest that you can go, then that's the farthest you can go. And that's the end of it for you. But I do think that at one of those shows that I can nail it.
Love it. What do you think? We talked about discipline and that kind of being something that you found within bodybuilding. Is there something else besides the discipline that bodybuilding has really given you or taught you? And more specifically, something that maybe bodybuilding has given you or taught you, Gary, that you don't think anything else or any other experience in life would have given you or taught you?
I definitely think that bodybuilding has brought me to places that I never thought that I would go. I told my wife this. We were after the show was in Arizona last weekend and for the USA's, and we went out the day after the show with my cousin who lives there, and he brought us to some of like the canyons and the mountains and everything, and we were just looking at the scenery. And this is stuff that we've never seen before. And of course, we could travel there if we wanted to, but I don't think that Arizona would have been the destination that we're going to pick a vacation for. And I said, the bodybuilding is one thing, but it's bringing us places that we would probably never would have been, because we're traveling for this stuff. I've been to Germany for FIBO. Maybe I would have went to Las Vegas, like if I wasn't a bodybuilder, like, just to say, but I've been there a bunch of times, for that sort of thing. So there's places that it has brought me. Obviously, it's the experience of meeting people that probably I would never have, met with that. I always joke that my wife likes men with muscles, and that was one of the first things when I first met her. Then I was just after my first show, and I'm not saying that she wouldn't have liked me had I not been in the gym, but I don't know if it would have got her attention as much. So maybe if I didn't bodybuild, I wouldn't even have married her. I wouldn't even have dated her. We don't know. So this is all a chain of events, through life. I think that, I have a 6-year-old son. He plays all sports, and he knows what I look like. I coached his baseball team this past spring, and he'll like yell across the diamond, "Give me a flex," so he understands. He sees me. He goes, "You got to do cardio today." He goes, "Yep." I'm like, "Yep." And so I hope that installs a little bit of work ethic for him with his sports. Do I want to be a bodybuilder? No, I don't think any parent is really rooting for their kid to be a bodybuilder. We know what that involves, and nobody would ever want to like volunteer their kid for that. But any other sport, whether it be baseball, wrestling, he's playing football now. I know that he sees me with pride. I know because the kids will tell him your dad looks like Captain America and stuff like that. So I know that, or the Hulk or whatever, so it makes him feel good. And he sees me doing what I'm doing. So I like that representation. Again, that would have never happened had I not been bodybuilding.
Awesome, man. All right. So you're going to be competing. Go ahead and mention that again, when your next competition is.
That's going to be September 2nd. So it is 4 weeks from last Thursday. So we're like 3 weeks, 5 days out. So that's gonna be in Pittsburgh, which is a little bit easier of a commute for me from New Jersey. It's about a 6-hour drive as opposed to a 5-hour flight to Arizona. I'm kind of excited about that.
And it's
you know,
it's the North Americans, correct?
North Americans. Yep. So this one, if you got to win, and then you got to place top 4 in the overall. And if you're super heavy, you're probably gonna be one of those guys, you know, because you're just so much bigger than the other, the lightweight and bantamweight. So it's got to get just, do your best. But like I said, my scope is small. Keep
Right.
it small. If you exceed it, then figure it out. If you find yourself in the first call out, well, then work from there. But just keep it small first.
For sure. All right, Gary. So we've had a thorough conversation. Is there anything that maybe we didn't touch on, or is there anything that you would like to kind of leave the listeners as we close things out?
I mean, one thing I always just preach towards anybody younger, or maybe they're older, or they more advanced to me, doesn't matter. I think a lot of people neglect or the journey of bodybuilding, the journey of prep, and they just see a destination. And then what that does is they put their self-worth into the placing on the trophy. And that is a mistake. You should every day of your prep or your bodybuilding, that is the competition, not the the competition itself is a talent show. It's a beauty pageant. It's a subjective opinion of some strangers. It has nothing to do with you. But are you getting up at 5 a.m. or whenever you're supposed to get up to do your cardio? Are you eating the food the right way? Are you doing everything? You're executing your workouts. That's your performance. So I think that people think, like, well, I'm training for the show. No, the show is now. That all that at the end is the ending. And that's how I've never been really upset when I've walked off stage when I did less than stellar, because I always knew that I gave it my best and I performed the way I should. So, I like to leave people as don't neglect the journey looking forward. You're in the competition right now.
Excellent, man. All right, Gary. So if anybody wants to reach out to you, if anybody wants to find out more about you, if anybody kind of wants to follow along your personal bodybuilding journey, where can the listeners of Behind the Muscle podcast reach out to you and follow along and find you?
Instagram would be the best. It's the_real_GSIX. I'm on Instagram all day long. I check all the DMs, even the ones that on that secret thing. I check it. I will answer you. So if you have any questions, comments, whatever, let me know.
Awesome. And I can vouch for that, because I just sent you a random DM on Instagram. I know it goes into the the request box or the secret box. So I just want to say thank you, Gary, so much for coming on to the podcast, sharing your bodybuilding story, your bodybuilding journey with myself and the listeners. Your time is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
For sure. So listeners, I just want to thank you once again for tuning in and listening to Behind the Muscle podcast. If you guys would like to find out more about this podcast specifically, all of that information is on Instagram, and it's different from the name of this podcast because I also have another podcast. So you can find the information for the 2 podcasts that I have at 127 Fit. Again, I just appreciate you guys listening. If you guys would do me a huge favor and please just take this episode of Gary's and share it on your social media platforms so that more people can find the podcast, more people can listen to the podcast, and more people can be encouraged and built up. I would love that. I would appreciate that. And one other favor I'd ask of all of you listeners, please subscribe to the 127 Fit podcast. That's where you're going to find Behind the Muscle podcast episodes. Leave a written comment, review, and once again, just go ahead and share all the episodes that you found that great value in. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.